Good morning. Thank you so much for joining for our latest Learn and Grow webinar, this one on the topic of putting your house in order. My name is Dustin Petz, and I have the joy of serving as the president and CEO of the Kansas Methodist Foundation. Throughout Kansas, KMF empowers Methodist churches and ministries and individuals to be good stewards of the resources that we have been entrusted. We also help to grow resources for ministry to make a difference, to make disciples of Jesus Christ, to change lives, and to transform the world around us. Thank you so much for being here today. Let me offer a prayer as we begin. Gracious God, we give you thanks for this day, the day that you have made. We give you thanks for the ways you have blessed us in the midst of life for purpose and for ministry, and with the resources that we have been entrusted. Remind us that they are yours, and that we're caretakers of them for a time. And because of that, we want to be good stewards of what we've been entrusted and make sure we're able to use them to make a difference in our families and in ministries, the church, and others that we care about. We ask and pray your spirit to be upon us today as we learn, as we think about how we can be faithful. God, we give you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen. Presenting today, the topic of putting your house in order is the Kansas Methodist Foundation staff member, Tyler Curtis. And he serves as our Chief Development Officer. He brings more than 20 years of experience in education and development to the Kansas Methodist Foundation. Prior to working here, he served in the University Advancement, Alumni Relations, and Governmental Affairs at Emporia State University. His experience also includes secondary education and administration, where he was both a teacher and then a principal. He has a bachelor's of education and a master's of science in education administration from ESU, as well as an executive certificate in transformational nonprofit leadership from Notre Dame. Tyler and his family are active members of Emporia First United Methodist Church, and great joy to have you here. Welcome, Tyler.
Thank you, and thanks for being here. So I think I'll be doing a lot of the speaking today, but for sure Dustin will pipe in as well. A lot of times we do some joint presentations, and we both share this work a lot. But a lot of my work does end up being related to estate planning, helping people do legacy gifts, those kind of things, and helping people navigate the process that gets them into an estate plan that usually includes some kind of a legacy component as well. That goes back to ministry. So honored to be here with everybody today, and want to lift up what Dustin said earlier too. If you have questions along the way, feel free to input them into the chat. If we see a hand raised or something like that, we'll try to get to you as well. But as those questions come up, please go ahead and ask them or submit them, and we'll try to get to those as much as possible. We want this to be both for you as well as for viewers later, helpful information. And if you have a question, you can guarantee that somebody else has the exact same one. So thanks for doing that. So I'm going to share a slide deck, and we'll go through those with us today. And let me get this set up here just a little bit. So is that looking pretty good to you? Okay. So like Dustin said, the Methodist Foundation, he lifted up what we do, and we're a ministry. Our ministry is to activate generosity for those ministries that you and others care about. So that's our job. That's what we do. That's what we love to do. We love to work with individuals. We also partner with churches to manage their resources so that those resources can be put to good work towards ministries and other nonprofit kinds of activities that our faithful Methodists and our churches engage in with their congregation members and others. So this is a work that we love to do, and that's why we're in the estate planning kind of business. This is a way for us to share our resources towards ministries that we care about both during life as well as after death. We kind of have a basis of a theology and money, obviously a Wesleyan basis for that, a biblical basis for how we view money. And Dustin lifted this up in his prayer. We really view money as a gift, as a resource from God. God is the provider of all of our gifts. God is the provider of all of our resources. God's entrusted us with these resources. And we are, like Dustin said earlier in his prayer, temporary stewards. We are stewards of these resources. That is our role, is to take what God has given us and to steward that accordingly. Whether it's our time, talent, or our treasure, those are all resources that God has given us, and God wants us to use those resources in a positive way, wants us to make a difference, wants us to be a blessing to others. So we are to use those resources to be a blessing to others. And as John Wesley said pretty simply, earn all you can. And at the same time, save all you can. And at the same time, also give all you can. So we are entrusted to be productive individuals who use our time and talent wisely so we can earn. We are to save that so that we have resources for ourselves and our families. And we are also to give, and we are to be generous givers during life and even beyond when it comes to our legacies. So that's where we come from in our ministry in terms of a basis for the theology of money. Today we want to talk about kind of four things. Estate planning will be our main topic. So why is that plan important? What is it in general? And why is that important? What kind of documents and what kind of decisions do I have to make when I'm putting something like that together? And then we also want to touch on how you would go about making a charitable gift as part of that plan to leave a legacy. So that's kind of where we'll go today with those four questions, those four general ideas, and want to talk about estate planning in that context. So we have a little poll here. Dustin's going to launch that, and just if you were kind of guessing about what percent of the U.S. population don't have an estate plan. We hope that a lot of our Methodists do have estate plans. We're working on ways to hopefully get those to where all of us do. But what do you think? Just random guesses there. Answer that poll out there. Are you seeing that on your screen? So just an FYI, I don't see it. So Dustin, you can close that when you're ready, and I may not see the results either. So
I'll close it. I'll share the results. Here it is.
So I'm not seeing that. Dustin, what was our number one answer there?
Number one answer is 75% of U.S. citizens do not have an estate plan.
Okay. Well, we're a little high on that. So, but not much. Not much. Half to 60% estimated don't have plans. So, like you said, like we kind of guessed, a lot of people don't. So about half the population, a little over half the population, don't have a plan. Like we said, as stewards of God's resources, part of our stewardship is to have a plan for what happens with those resources beyond our life. So we want our Methodists to be 100% in the plan. We want 0% to not have a plan, right? So what is an estate plan? I think sometimes this word estate gets a little bit tricky. It's kind of a hurdle sometimes. It's one of these things that we don't want to think about. And then when we do think about estate, we're like, do I really have an estate? Like, what does that mean? Like, I don't have a mansion. I don't have, these white fences that are lining my property and those kind of things. But an estate plan is simply a written document of what you want to have happen with your assets when you're no longer here. When you die, what happens to my assets? It's also documenting key medical and financial decisions during your lifetime and putting those in place in case you can't manage those affairs yourself during life. So that is all part of an estate plan. It's not just your asset distribution. It certainly is your asset distribution from a trust or a will, but it's also those things like durable powers of attorney for health and finance, as well as advanced directives for health. So that's a comprehensive estate plan, and just putting in writing what you want to have happen upon your death when it comes to your assets. We certainly believe in a team approach. So when it comes to that, we think you need to have an attorney who's got experience in estate planning to either create that will or create that trust. think your financial advisor should have some input into this. They can help you figure out what assets you do have and how those assets will be transferred upon your passing. Your accountant is obviously key. They're going to be taking care of those financial affairs for you and giving you guidance as to how to best do that from a tax perspective. And charitable organizations are part of this conversation. This is certainly a piece where your legacy can live on, where your good works can live on, where things that you are doing during life that are meaningful to you can live on via your estate plan and you're giving through that plan. When it comes to that team, your family as a donor, very important piece of that, to make up those goals and to start creating part of that legacy. A lot of us, if we have children ourselves, we want to leave part of our assets to our children so that they have something to live on and hopefully do good for them beyond our life. That attorney is going to be key to creating that will or that trust that you put together as the vehicle for distributing your assets. Your accountant to make those tax-wise decisions based on your unique situation. Everybody has a different situation, a different net worth, and they are obviously going to be your best advisor when it comes to your personal tax situation. Your financial advisor to manage those investments, IRAs, stocks, bonds, other kinds of investments that you have, the planning process, where does it go after I'm not here, how is it beneficial, and then also how would I pass it on to my heirs or into charity. Your financial advisor will have a perspective on that. And then those charitable organizations also to again add to that legacy. So kind of think of our legacy as helping our family, our loved ones, and also caring for those causes that we know and love, that we support during our life. So that's kind of that team approach to who needs to be at the table when you start thinking about or amending your estate plan. So why is it important? Well, it depends. It depends on where you're at in life. When we're younger, it's a lot of, and we have minor children, it's a lot about how am I going to care for minor kids if something happens to me? I don't plan to die. At the same time, if I do, I've got minor children. What's going to happen to them? How are they going to be cared for? How would their education be paid for? How would other things in their life be paid for if I was not here? Who would take care of them? Who assists those who handle your affairs after death? So who is going to be those individuals that succeed you, that are going to be after you? How can we assist them in handling those affairs? And how can we help them make good decisions and make decisions that you would want them to make? So it does put you in control of that asset management, helps you avoid conflicts. Along with that, if you put it in writing, and this is my plan, it makes it pretty clear that that's what you intended to have happen and reduces that conflict. It determines who manages your affairs, whether that's your health care decisions, your financial decisions, if you are living but no longer able to do that yourself. It also helps the doctors and your family members know how you would want to be treated if you were no longer had any kind of activity in your brain or otherwise, and how you would want to be treated in that condition. So it determines that healthcare representative, your financial caretaker, as well as where those estate assets go and where your charitable intent would be. So important stuff, important decisions to make and things to consider, certainly while we're going through life and approaching this. So the four big considerations are who receives your assets at death and how do they receive them? What's the best method to do that? And those two are going to be the bulk of our conversation today regarding estate planning. So we're going to talk mostly about who receives those assets, how they receive those, and what's the best method, as well as planning for incapacity. So you need to have a complete set of documents that's going to entail a durable power of attorney, an attorney that would, if you are incapacitated during life, durable, it's able to be done beyond your mental capacity, both during life and in death, to make healthcare decisions as well as financial decisions, and then a living will or an advance directive. Sometimes that living will is called an advance directive, but that lays out healthcare decisions that you would like to have in place should you be incapacitated and in a constant vegetative state. How long would you like to persist in that condition? Would it be okay to withhold food and water and those kind of things if that was the only way that you were living, was via a machine to keep you alive? Tax planning is also a key thing. Estate and gift tax rules, as well as income taxation of retirement accounts. We might talk about that just a little bit, but not extensively. When it comes to estates, most estates, 99.5% of estates, do not owe any kind of federal estate tax. That exemption is so high right now that most people don't have estates that are over 12 million as a single person or 24 million as a married couple. So most of us don't have to worry about estate taxes from a federal perspective. However, there are certain assets that we have that if they're passed down in a certain way, there will be taxes paid on those. So for example, if I inherit an IRA from my father and I receive those payments, I will owe income tax on those. So I might want to put my plan together in a way that uses those first for other purposes, and then maybe I would inherit something that's not taxed. So we'll visit just a little bit about that as we're going through today's program as well, but mostly number 1 and 2. So the first consideration, who receives your assets at death and how? So who are the beneficiaries? That's certainly a key decision that you need to make. Who is those individuals that are going to receive that? A lot of times, like I said, if we're married, the first thing is everything transfers usually to our spouse. So if we're married at death and we're the first to die, our half of our estate just goes over to our spouse. So what happens upon the second death if we're married? Well, if we have kids, a lot of times we want to leave some to our kids. And again, if we have organizations that we like to support and those kind of things, we might want to put into place some plans to where these individuals and these organizations would receive that. So for example, I've got 2 kids. So I could do a couple different things. I could certainly do everything to half and half to my kids, or I could do something to where maybe it's 40% to one kid, 40% to the other kid, 20% to charity, or 45, 45, 10, if I wanted to tithe part of my estate. So determining who's going to be the recipients is a key decision. And then how are they going to get that? They can certainly have a bequest. So inside of your will or inside of your trust, you can bequest and have it done that way. Typically, we advise people to think about that in terms of percentages. We don't know what our net worth is going to be when we leave this world. We don't know what's going to happen. It could be what it is today. It could be more. It could be less. It depends on what happens during those last years of life. But we recommend a percentage so that whatever's left, at least those percentages are abided by. So whether it's this number or this number, percentage-wise, it's still going to flow the same way. You can also do designated beneficiaries. So for example, on your life insurance policy, your retirement accounts, your bank accounts, you can designate those beneficiaries directly. So you can say, I want this life insurance policy to pay to these individuals. You can split those, by the way. It doesn't have to be just one, but you can split those out to where it's split between other individuals or an organization or a combination thereof. So you can do that as well. And those designated beneficiaries will certainly work and hold up. The other thing is planning for contingencies, and that's where we're going to go next. It's something to think about. However I choose to give these assets away and distribute them, what's my contingency if that individual or that organization predeceases me or is not around when I pass? So that's kind of a key consideration for sure, to plan that out. And we'll talk about a few ways that you can do that so that you have a pretty well-rounded plan that that impacts those contingencies that may happen. So that second consideration that leads into the first, leads from the first maybe, what's the best method? So once I've determined who's going to get these, I've got to determine how it's going to happen. And there's really three ways that you can go about doing that. One of those is a non-probate transfer. If you've heard of payable on death or transfer on death, those things work, and they work quite well as long as everybody dies in the right order. In other words, if on my payable on death and transfer on death, if I go first, and I have a transfer on death or payable on death to my kids, and they survive me, that's a good plan. The only bad thing about the POD or the TOD option is I have limited contingencies. So if I don't have the plan B and the plan C, so if my family's all on vacation, when we go and when the plane goes down, guess what? My plan now is no longer good. It's going to have to go through a probate court, and they'll have to decide who maybe those next heirs would be. So non-probate transfers work well. And we had a question earlier that was, well, what about real estate? And Kansas does allow you to transfer on death real estate. Again, the only issue with that is that if that's your only plan, if that contingency is not there, if the individual or individuals who you are planning to leave that to don't survive you, then we are going to have a situation where we're going to have to go and have a judge declare how that property would be handled. So that plan works. It just has limited contingency options. Yes, Dustin.
So you're saying I could, or the participants here could create a plan, an estate plan, that has my designated beneficiary from life insurance or IRA already be planned out of where the money goes. I could do that for bank accounts. I could do that for my house and my car and farm ground. I could have a deed that allows for a transfer on death to a new recipient with my kid or grandkids.
Yep, you absolutely can. That can be your whole plan. I mean, you could have a durable power of attorney for health, finance, a living will, and then everything TOD, POD, and that's a plan. That could be plan A. The only problem with this plan is that we just have to have some kind of contingency should people die out of order.
And would one of the challenges be if I died along with a child, for example, and they were going to be the beneficiary? What would happen? I mean, it would have to go then to probate court to decide, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Assets that aren't transferred on death, payable on death, or assigned to a trust are going to go through a probate court to determine how those assets should be distributed. So that's exactly right. So, I think there's some questions about, should I have everything transfer on death? And, when it comes to vehicles, like you said, I think in Kansas, you title that in your name and then transfer on death either to another individual, or you can transfer those to an estate as well to then be distributed by percent. So, so the other way, so to give out assets is to do wills, and a will is going to require a probate process. So some people say, well, why does a will provide or entail a probate process and a trust doesn't? That's just the rules. So when it comes to rules, wills go through a probate process where a probate judge and a probate court are going to ensure the executor is handling that will in the right way. So if you have a will, you're going to go after your passing. There's going to be a time there where all your debtors can come in and all your final expenses are paid, and will have an executor on that will, and that person's going to be in charge of handling everything that your will lays out. and the probate judge is going to basically look at that and say, it looks like everything's being handled according to the will, or looks like there's something that's missing here. We need to go ahead and have another plan here. So they will help. The court helps that executor make sure that your will and your wishes are followed. So a will after you die will require some kind of a probate process that maybe is a 6 month to a year kind of process to get that estate settled and handled. I thought you had a question there, Dustin, but nope. Okay. The other way to pass on assets is through a revocable living trust. And an individual can create a trust, can create a legal entity that can hold and also distribute properties. That's all a trust is just a legal entity that can hold property and then distribute property. And then the individual that's going to be handling that is called a successor trustee. So if you create this during life, you are both the grantor of your trust as well as the trustee of your trust. So it's a revocable, amendable, and it's a living trust. And upon your death, it becomes irrevocable. And a successor trustee then handles how you want things allocated per your wishes. So the advantage of the trust is that it does not require a probate process. A successor trustee will need some help. Typically, they may need the counsel of an estate planning attorney. They may need an accountant to help with this, but that successor trustee is charged and is empowered to take your written wishes and make those distributions and do what they need to do to settle your affairs according to your trust provisions. So that's another way of distributing assets. And we'll talk a little bit more about the trust in particular and how that will be used. But those are the three ways that you can give assets: non-probate transfers, probate via a will, and then also a revocable living trust.
So in what situations would the will and probate, option 2, be a better solution? It sounds to me number 3 would be the ideal solution to meet most of the contingencies, but there's maybe some situations where number 2 is a better option. What would those be?
I think it just depends on perhaps a size of an estate in some ways, how complex an estate someone has. If we have a lot of land and those kind of things, it's probably going to be easier to deal with those in a trust than it is to go through a probate process. But if things are fairly simple, we've got some cash and we've got a personal residence, and we really just don't have a lot of other assets that we need to manage. Maybe we don't have a lot of heirs. So perhaps we're a single individual with a few assets and 100% charitable intent. You could probably do a will and have everything taken care of easily. Wills are typically a little cheaper to get made. So they're a little cheaper to be executed during life. Probate cost varies, a percent to 2% of your estate going to those court fees or those kind of things. But if an individual doesn't have a lot of individuals who they could maybe count on as a trustee, and they have a fairly simple plan, then a will would probably do it. A trust has probably the most capacity to address any kind of contingencies and to be the most thorough document that you can do in your estate planning.
Tell us about an irrevocable trust. Is that something a person can set up in life, or is that only upon my death and what happens with my revocable?
Some trusts are irrevocable during life, like charitable remainder trusts are irrevocable during life. That's going to be a trust that actually pays you income, and then the remainder of that would go to a charity of your choice. Some individuals would want to put together a revocable trust, and then upon the death of the first spouse, The trust becomes irrevocable to keep that spouse from having to maybe handle certain family conflicts and those kind of things. So sometimes we have a situation where a couple together create a revocable living trust. At the first death, it becomes irrevocable because they know there's going to be some conflict there that they can avoid if it's, hey, my hands are tied, I can't change it. So the revocable is usually the most attractive option because you can set it up during life, amend it over time, completely take it away if you no longer need it, or just make continual amendments to it as your situation changes throughout life.
Thanks.
Yeah. So the basics of a living trust, and again, this is probably one of those ones that's kind of nuanced. So kind of like estates, it's like it's scary. So a trust, that must mean I must have like a bunch of money or something if I have a trust. And that's not the case. But a trust is simply a legal entity that can both hold and distribute property. It's a very old way of distributing and holding property after we die to be handed on to others. If you are married, you and your spouse are the initial trustees or grantors of that. If you're an individual, you would be the initial grantor and trustee of that trust, meaning that nothing really changes. You do everything you need to do during life, like you always do, and then at death, it becomes irrevocable and a successor succeeds you. It's 100% revocable, amendable during life. So I think it's always really key. You want to put it together the first time and do a really good job, but things change. Every 7 or so, 10 years, things change. Our kids get older, things happen, our priorities change, our priorities always make those changes during life. The key thing about a trust is you name a successor trustee, someone you trust, someone who will handle those affairs and follow your trust wishes, the things that you want to have happen. They are going to follow those to the letter of the trust, and you're going to trust them to do that. It is irrevocable at that time, so your successor trustee cannot make changes. They can only follow the directions that you've laid out. And that trust document is certainly going to include an asset distribution plan, which will be carried out by your successor trustee. So that includes distributions to your heirs, as well as any charitable distribution that you have as part of your plan. So the key thing about a trust is we got to create it during life. We got to assign the right people to take care of it after life. And then we need to tie assets to it during life so it is funded, so that everything flows into our trust. Like we said a little bit earlier, anything that's not titled into the name of a trust or anything that does not transfer upon death or payable on death, that's going to go to a probate court. So the big advantage of a trust is you avoid probate. You avoid that court expense, and you avoid that process. You avoid that public process. That is probate. That is a public process. Your will becomes public. Your trust is more private. But anything that we forget to put in the trust does have to flow through a probate court, but it can be done. So it's not like if you forget to do something, it breaks the trust. It can be done.
So if I have a house, I ought to title my house in the name of the Dustin Petz Revocable Trust. Same for vehicle or land or other things. So I need to fund the trust with my stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
You create a deed, you put your personal residence in the name of the trust, and then at death, the trust will then, your successor trustee will choose what happens to that. So your successor trustee could choose to sell it, take all the proceeds from that sale, and then distribute those to your heirs. Maybe one of your heirs wants that asset, and based on their percentage, it would count towards their percent of what they inherit. So that could do that way too. So just to give like a really simple example, it's never going to be this easy. But let's say you have a $400,000 estate. $400,000, you've got 3 kids, and you're choosing to give 25% to each kid and 25% to charity. So you have a $400,000 estate, $100,000 goes to each kid, $100,000 goes to charity. And the house is part of the estate. The house is worth $100,000. One kid says, I want the house. They can get the house. That's their share. The others get cash or whatever else is divvied up. If no one wants the house, they're like, hey, no one wants to live there. The trustee will then sell it and then divide that accordingly amongst the heirs and the charities. So the trust makes a really clean way to equally distribute by percentage how you want your assets distributed. Other questions about the basics of a living trust?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Does that mean that can you have a combo where you want to designate maybe the house to one of the kids on top of them getting a percentage?
Your trust could do that. Yes,
Okay.
your trust can do that. So inside your trust, you can always say, specifically, I want this asset, I want this house to go to this person. And then the remainder of the asset should be divvied up accordingly by percent in this manner. So you can certainly do a combination. Good question. And that's also an advantage of a trust. It's really hard to do that on a deed, like on a transfer on death deed or something. That's too complicated. A trust gives you that power to really make these kinds of distributions in sophisticated ways.
I have a question that relates to people that are anticipating moving into a retirement setting. Several options for housing. One would be to rent, the other would be to buy. Do you have some advice in terms of if you buy, you get a percentage back? Does that need to be listed in the trust, or is that a matter of the facilities process and how you deal with the facility?
Yeah, you would still have that amount owed to be paid to your trust upon your death. So that amount, so in that situation where you do buy in and then you receive some back, that payable, so in that case, a payable on death, that benefit would go to your trust and could be distributed from there.
Okay.
I would think there would be a designation beneficiary document, type of document with that retirement community or wherever it is that would ask who is to be receiving the residual from this. So yeah, making sure you're naming your trust in that, or it might be, first to your spouse and then second to the trust or something.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. Like a lot of so for individuals who are married, a lot of times their first beneficiary on a life insurance policy or retirement account is going to be their spouse, and it should be. Their contingent, their alternate beneficiary would be their trust. So that way, if their spouse predeceases or they co-decease, then those assets would roll into the trust to then be distributed according to the plan. The trust is a great bucket to do that from. Great bucket to do that from.
The question that I have has to do with when you have a trust, and then how do you properly close a trust? I mean, is there a process to that? Do you have to seek legal counsel to do that?
So how would your successor trustee close it out?
Yeah.
Yeah. So once everything is settled and everything is paid out, then the trust would close. There's really not a legal process to that. It's really just a matter of, are all the assets entitled to that trust now spent? Sometimes that takes quite a bit of time, depending on if you have sub trusts for like educational things or something that would live on and pay a percentage to over time. But the successor trustee will take that from beginning all the way to end. And as soon as that last nickel's paid out of the trust, it then ceases, and there will be one final tax return done. So a trust does require a tax return, and as soon as that tax return is net zero and it's zero balanced, it closes.
So you don't have to seek legal advice on closing a trust?
Nope. Nope. An attorney and an accountant will basically will basically help the successor trustee from the beginning all the way to the end.
Thank you.
I'm going to lift up, Tyler, there was a question in the chat about what if I don't have a family member who can serve as my successor trustee?
Sure.
And I replied in the chat that you can name anybody as successor trustee. It doesn't have to be a family member, just someone you would trust and who has a willingness to steward your wishes, or an attorney or some kind of trust company or organization who would take on that work on behalf of you.
Yep, that's exactly right. So it can be a close friend, it can be a confidant, it can be a mentor, or it could certainly be a corporate trustee, somebody from a bank trust department. So a lot of times when we think about trustees, we want to think about three deep. So think about your first choice, think about your second choice, and then in the third position, a lot of times that is a corporate trustee. So that bank trust department, or perhaps you would name a legal firm that has a trust department. You might not name the specific attorney, but if it's a legal department that's going to survive for years and years, they're always going to have a trust department and will have somebody that can handle that. We usually name them last because they're usually going to be the more expensive option of the options you have. But if you don't have somebody that's a family member or a friend, you can certainly have somebody still do that on your behalf that you don't know. So just kind of the advantages of a trust, you do avoid probate. So a trust usually costs a little bit more to set up at the front end, but you do avoid that court cost at the end. It does have a lot more room for contingencies. I mean, even in Cheryl's case, you can say, I want the house to go here. If that person doesn't survive me, then it would be part of the trust that's divvied up amongst the rest of the heirs. So you have lots of room for contingency planning in a trust document. It allows you to have a lot of control over where those assets go. It's certainly a more private manner because it's not a legal process that goes into a public court record. And it is typically a smooth transition, especially if you counseled with your successors and your heirs on how things will go upon your death. So communication is still key, part of the process, but it allows that to be pretty smooth in the end.
There are two questions in the chat, one of which is a pour over will, and how does it serve in this situation?
Okay, good. So inside of a trust, you're going to have documents. You're going to have a trust document. You're going to have a durable power of attorney for health, finance for each person that's part of it. Durable power of attorney for health and finance. Sorry, I mentioned those both. An advance directive, and then you're going to have a pour over will, or it's typically called a pour over will. It's still a last will and testament, but it's referred to as a pour over will, and its only purpose is if there is an asset that we have forgotten to title or get as a beneficiary into the trust. So we forgot that car and it's hanging out there. We forgot that IRA account and it's hanging out there. Then your successor trustee can take the trust document and the pour over will into a probate court and say, here's the deal. They intended to have everything flow into the trust and be distributed from there. We missed this one. We are now filing for the ability to go ahead and have that asset go to the trust, at which time the probate court will pour it back into the trust. So it is the safety net to capture any assets that may have been forgotten during life in terms of beneficiary to get into the trust. So it still will be there. We just don't want to use it, because if we use it, we no longer have the advantage of the trust, just to avoid probate. One of the advantages, at least.
The other question that came up was, does the Kansas Methodist Foundation do trustee service? We actually are serving as trustees for multiple irrevocable charitable remainder trusts. And so that is something that we currently do. I don't think we haven't taken on the work of being that corporate successor trustee. As far as I am aware in the organization, we're not currently serving in that capacity. There are some other Methodist foundations in our kind of national connection that do that service. And so that might be something that we would be willing to take on in the future. We currently don't do that as of now. So I wanted to answer that question too. Go ahead.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. So that was a thorough answer, Dustin. Other things on a trust that we want to lift up or talk about? So the final thing on planning and things to consider is certainly if we're caring for minors, how they would receive their inheritance. So a lot of folks would like for them to receive an inheritance that perhaps will pay for their health expenses, their maintenance, care, and support during life. And then also maybe give a payout at certain ages. If I got an inheritance when I was 18 years old, I probably wouldn't have done very good things with it. At maybe 25 or 30, I'd be a little more responsible with that. So special considerations certainly come up when it comes to caring for minors, how we set those assets aside so that they can be cared for while also being responsible. If you have special needs situations, if one of your heirs or dependents has special needs, that's something that an estate attorney can really help with so that it's set up in a way that any kind of Medicaid, Medicare, SSDI, any of those kind of benefits that help with individual special needs would be used first, and then your assets would supplement that. So when we have special needs situations, those are great to disclose so that things can be handled in a way that we get maximum benefit for your dependent and for your heir. So, and if we have people in our heirs who may have bad money management, not everybody's good with money. How would I maybe set aside their inheritance so they only got 1% every year, and it wouldn't be this big lump sum that gets eaten up pretty quickly. So these are things to think through, and things that we can plan for, things that you and your estate planning attorney can plan for and put in place special provisions so that this is not an issue. And some folks want to protect those resources from a lawsuit. So if one of your heirs is a doctor, a nurse, even someone who could be sued for malpractice, there are certainly ways that you can leave their inheritance to where that is not a resource that would be part of a lawsuit. And when we go after lawsuits, we go after the biggest pot of money there possibly is. So if we can do that in a way that protects those assets from being viewed as an available resource, then you can avoid that as well. So things to consider are certainly who's receiving those and what are the options for them to receive that so that it's not a problem for them. It's actually a gift. We never want to create problems for people. Any other questions on trust and kind of ways of using a trust or even a will or a probate transfer or non-probate transfer? We want to quickly kind of talk a little bit about too the other part of this. So when it comes to managing our assets and distributing those, we typically do think of our heirs, which may be our kids, loved ones, and then also about that charitable piece. What's that legacy look like? And I think part of this process is to dig in and think about what really does matter to us. What's mattered to us during life? What's given us a good, fulfilling life? What's been life-giving during this journey? How do we want to be remembered? And these are conversations that we can kind of have sometimes around the holidays, even, just thinking about, gosh, I wonder how we'll be remembered and how would we like to be remembered? And what's that legacy that you hope to leave behind? It's been said that we're all going to leave a legacy. You get to determine what it's going to be. So we're all going to leave a story. We're all going to leave something. You get to determine what that looks like. So those are also part of this legacy and this estate planning process, things to consider on how do I want to be remembered? What's the most meaningful way to do that? When it comes to charitable giving in your estate plan, I think the number one thing is just that. It allows us to leave a legacy that makes a difference. If we cared about our church and we cared about our community, we cared about these kinds of organizations that do great work and meet good needs, then we want to remember those in our plans, in our estate planning. It may reduce some tax liability. It certainly can increase those deductions and those kind of things. But when we leave a legacy, like we're talking about, maybe using the Methodist Foundation as a receptacle of a charitable gift, we're going to receive that and we're going to professionally manage it so that your wishes are handled. So we're going to have a separate agreement on file where you say, here's how I want my charitable legacy spent, and we will abide by your donor intent, letter by letter. And it will also be managed in a way that will have the most ability to grow and continue to give on your behalf. There are certainly tools that can increase income as well. This presentation today is certainly not long enough to get into those details, but there are things like charitable remainder trust that can give you life income as well as make a charitable gift in the end. And if you're interested in talking about those, please let us know, because I can certainly spend some time on that and see if you're a good candidate for receiving that. Those are great ways to make a charitable gift as well as do some income planning during life. So those are some reasons to do that. When we talk to individuals about estate planning and giving, we come from a faith background. We talk about tithing quite a little bit. So this might be one of the times, or it could be, a continuation of, it could be the only time in your life where you think, man, I could really actually give a full tithe of my net worth to the work to create disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. I could do that with my estate. I could take a 10% amount and make that gift. So that's a place to start. Some people have also said, charity means a lot to me. I love raising my kids. I love my grandkids, and I want to see them. And I also know that my work with the church and other nonprofits has been very, very meaningful. My church, my education, all those kind of things, they mean a lot to me. I'm going to consider that another child. So if I have 2 kids, maybe I split it 3 ways, or 3 kids, I split it 4 ways. 1 kid, I split it half and half. So we encourage people to think through that of what are the needs of your heirs, and what it might look like to be generous in your giving as part of your estate plan. When it comes to establishing a permanent fund at a place like the Kansas Methodist Foundation, we do, so you can direct those resources. You can say, hey, I want 10%, 25%, whatever percent of your net estate to go towards a charitable gift. Most good estate planning attorneys will also think about that in terms of what's the most tax efficient gift. So in this case, if you have like IRAs, if you have other kind of retirement plans, qualified retirement plans, your trust document or your will even would say use those resources first to fund the charitable gift, and the rest would be taken from other things that don't have the kind of tax penalty that the IRA and other qualified retirement plans have. So we would take that, create a separate memorandum of understanding that can be updated as many times as you want during life. We don't charge for that, of course. Just like your estate plan, sometimes your charitable plans change too, but that's something that we do. And then we can create this fund for you that kind of flows this way. So you're at the top here. You're the individual. You make that gift to the Kansas Methodist Foundation, and perhaps part of that funds your church. Perhaps part of that funds scholarships. Other nonprofits, maybe you give to UMCOR, maybe you give to your university, maybe you give to a local domestic violence shelter. Any number of 501c3s qualify there. We also have camping ministries and grant ministries through the Methodist Foundation. So we can work with you to create what that charitable legacy looks like. I want to designate this percent, and I want it to be used for these kinds of ministries. And that would become the Generous Donor Family Fund. And that family fund would pay out of your family's name as long as we would want that to happen. So that's one way to use the Methodist Foundation in that way, Dustin.
And like the other components about trust, the benefit of this is we usually draft into these documents contingencies. So if something changes or the world changes, we can still hold to your donor intent and be able to deploy the resources to do ministry that are connected to your heart and your values.
Dustin, you always have a good example of that in relation to the individual who wanted to support Methodist hospitals in Kansas. So we don't have those anymore. So what happens when we no longer have a Methodist hospital, but we have a fund that says we want this fund to be used for Methodist hospitals?
Yeah, the person from Kansas community over 100 years ago died, wanted to support patients who couldn't cover their bill in Methodist hospitals in Western Kansas. And we now are caring for that. It actually went to a court and broadened its purposes. We would be able to do that in our agreements with you. But now we use Grace Med and Genesis Family Health, two entities that are Methodist related, to deploy funds in alignment with this woman's wishes from her gift over 100 years ago. And I like that ability for us to build into it adaptation to be able to do ministry.
Yeah, I think it's a really good example of how we can still uphold donor intent and the donor's wishes, even though the exact vehicle that they envisioned being around forever and ever and ever wasn't, but other things were. It's broad enough to where we can understand what that ministry really is. So for example, this is just kind of like give you a kind of by the numbers thing. If part of your estate gift was add up to $300,000, so maybe that was whatever percent of your estate, we're going to pay out 4% of that a year in a permanent fund situation. We have some options that we can talk about, but if it's a permanent fund, right now our payout rate's 4%. In that first year, we're going to pay out $12,000, and they want to support their church with 40% of that. So that's $4,800 that goes to the church. They want to support the camp at 20%. So that's $2,400 that goes to the camp. They want to support a Pathways grant for new ministries in Kansas that's distributed by the Methodist Foundation. $1,200 goes there. And they have another 501c3 or two or whatever, and they want 30% to go there. So $3,600 would be given in that family's name that year. In a permanent fund situation, this would last forever. And your family legacy would literally last in perpetuity. And it could be something that even your heirs tie back to. So if we created the Petz Family Fund, it could initially be Dustin and Shelley Petz, but it could certainly be other members of the Petz family later that contributed to that fund. And then the Petz Family Fund just continues to survive on. So kind of a neat way to think about legacy and how we establish things that are meaningful beyond life. So Dustin, I don't know if you can put this up there right quick. This is just our, you can give any asset literally to charity. We can take anything. We can take home, autos, we can take Roths, we can take other plans, stocks and bonds, farm ground, whole life. We need to do, any of those can be given charitably. But what would maybe be the best one to give initially if you have it? Do you go ahead and launch that one? And Dustin, you can launch that and you need to make a guess there. Maybe you've been through this before and you know, but Dustin, let me know when you have a result. Oops, sorry, you're muted. I can see your lips moving. I guess I can't hear you.
Sorry, we have about 2/3 of the people have responded. So I'll end it and share the results and tell you what we have here. So We have one person said cash savings accounts is a good one. We had two people say a Roth IRA is the best and first gift to give. We had 5, so 56% of the respondents said a qualified retirement plan, traditional IRA, 401k, 403b. And then we had one person say farm ground, 2 people said whole life insurance.
Okay. So we had quite a few folks get this right. This is certainly the best thing to do. And like we said earlier, we can put in your trust documents that your charitable gift would come from these assets first and foremost, because when people receive these as a distribution, they do pay income tax on that. Unless a house is considerably appreciated and worth quite a large dollar amount, a house does not have any taxes. Autos don't. Cash and checking accounts, no tax owed. There's no inheritance tax on that. Roth IRAs, because the tax is paid at the beginning, so you use after-tax money to fund those. There is no income tax on those distributions, so that's a great one to inherit. A lot of times people think stocks and bonds are good ones, and they're not bad. I mean, like I said, they're always good there. But if you inherit those, there's actually a step up in basis. So when we figure out capital gains, it's based on your cost basis, your initial cost. So if I bought a stock for $10 and I sell it at 100, I owe capital gains on $90. Well, if I inherit that stock, my cost basis for my tax liability is what it was worth the day I inherited it. So my dad might have purchased it for 10, but it was worth 100 when I get it. My cost basis is now 100. So when I go to sell it, maybe I sell it for 150. I only pay $50 in capital gain there, not 140. That would have been based on the original amount. So that step up in basis that exists right now, that's really good. And same thing with farm ground, step up in basis. That's what keeps farm ground inherited so lucrative. Every time it's inherited and passed on, it receives a step up in basis. So that original amount that could have been purchased for a very nice sum at the time, but now is worth considerably more. I'm not paying capital gain on that. Whole life insurance policies, there's no inheritance tax tied to those. So good assets to give to heirs. What we can do in this process, we can provide you assistance like education like this. We can walk you through a planning document. We can help answer questions. We can help get you prepared for a good meeting with an attorney. We can connect you to attorneys that we know and work with. We have people really throughout the state that we've worked with quite closely on these plans. And we also have access to our own in-house estate planner that we contract with. So the Methodist Foundation can certainly help you in this process by getting you prepared, making those connections, as well as perhaps giving you access to our estate planner, which is John Griffin. He's a contract employee. He's an estate planner, lives out of Heston, Kansas, been doing this a little over 30 years, and he can help put together the plan as well. Our services, whether it's John or our planning process, there's no cost to that. There is certainly a cost to making a will. There's a cost for making a trust, but all the preparation work, all the outlining work, all the things that we do to help prepare you to do that, as well as perhaps carve out a charitable piece, there's no expenses that you incur with those services. So we are happy and proud to partner with you in those ways, and would be honored to serve you in your planning needs and help however we can.
One person asks a question: if family sells land or house when parent dies, so I'm assuming this is the children in this situation, they sell mom and dad's land and home, does the family owe taxes?
So if they sell it, typically, immediately, there won't be. I mean, if you hold that land for quite some time and then sell it, it could have appreciated based on when you inherited it and when you sell it. But if that's all part of the estate settlement process soon after the death, because of those step up in basis, and because there's so little tax attached to real estate, again, if there's a certain amount of appreciation, but there's a step up basis there too. So for the most part, those are going to be tax-free transactions.
It'll be tax-free for the capital gain side. The other tax to consider would be if the estate is quite large. There would be the estate tax if they're over the $12 million or $14 million or $24 million, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So if the individual is an individual, they have the first $12,060,000 is exempt. If they're a married couple, it's $24,120,000, which is portable. So even if if you had one parent pass away and then the second pass away later, that estate still has right as of right now over $24 million in exemption. So it would be rare that there's tax associated with it, but to your point, there's a possibility.
And you said for now, and what I think you're hinting at is that Congress may change that estate tax level and the deduction level, and that would go in effect in a few years, right?
2025 is when that current exemption sunsets, and the thought is that it would probably go back down to maybe where it was prior to the change, but also adjusted for inflation. So probably looking at reasonably somewhere in the $6 to $7 million range of exempt. Again, portable to a spouse, so a couple would have 12 to 14. So kind of planning towards that, but it's in Congress's hands, and they have until 2025 to act. I'm sure we'll get right on that. So it's election day. It's election day. So
what other questions do people have that Tyler can address? You can unmute or put it in the chat, either way. Any other final thoughts, Tyler?
No, I'll just kind of put here's, we'll share these slides as well as the link with everybody who's here. So thank you again for joining us and being active in the participation today. Feel free to get a hold of us. We would love to serve you and work with you, as well as other people who may be connected to your church, other ministries. We serve any Methodist throughout the state of Kansas. So we are certainly honored to serve you and anyone else in your connection. So thank you for attending and being generous with your time. We hope we can serve you otherwise.
Yes. Thank you all so much. Hope you have a blessed day. And we look forward to serving you if that would be helpful for you and for your family. So thank you.